Hello, and welcome to the Strategic Storytelling Podcast, the podcast where you'll learn how to communicate like a pro by leveraging the power of stories. I'm your host, Cesar Castro, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here, for connecting, for listening to this third episode. I'm so happy that after 2 episodes, we already have hundreds of downloads, a lot of people who have subscribed already to the podcast. So if you're listening for the first time, go and subscribe. Subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast, so when new episodes come out, you can be notified right away. And in this episode number 3, I want to talk about 3 types of stories. 3 types of stories that I think every leader needs to have in his bag. And the reason why I've decided to talk about this first is because I love leadership. It's just something that I've always been fascinated with. Even as a child, even as a kid, I remember going to the library and reading books, reading history books, reading books about leaders and how they influence change. And I think from that young, early stage in my life, I just began to develop this love for influence, for leadership. And that's why later on as a young adult, I studied psychology, mainly because I wanted to better understand these principles of influence and persuasion and how all that impacts our mind. And then after that, I did a master's in organizational psychology so I could understand how to use all these principles in the business world. And now as I've worked with more and more leaders, I've noticed something. I've noticed a certain pattern. I've noticed that all great leaders are also great communicators. And I would actually double click this because it's not just communicators. All great leaders are actually really good storytellers. And throughout these last 10 years, where I've literally worked with thousands of leaders from different companies and industries, I've seen this pattern over and over again. And the reason why I think is because if you really think about it, 70 to 80% of leadership is all about communication. It's all about how we communicate and specifically how we speak in public. So if you're a leader, you've probably had this opportunity to speak in front of groups, whether that group be 10 people, 50 people, or in some cases, hundreds of people. And when we talk about public speaking, and I want you to understand this, whenever I talk about public speaking, I'm really referring to storytelling. Because the best public speakers are usually also the best storytellers. I would actually go as far as saying that being a good public speaker isn't 70, 80%. It's about being a good storyteller. Being able to tell good stories and then being able to make a point with those stories. And as I've studied more and had the chance to work with more leaders, and especially these leaders who are also great storytellers, I've come to this conclusion that leaders don't just communicate stories, but the best leaders actually communicate 3 types of stories. They're always telling these 3 types of stories. And I want to share with you what these 3 stories are, these 3 types of stories. I want to be very practical in explaining to you what they're about, kind of some questions you can even ask yourself so you can find these type of stories. Because again, to be able to tell these stories, potentially you first have to be able to find these stories. So are you ready? Do you have a pen and a paper out so we can dive in? So first, all great leaders, they have what I call a value story. Value story. And this story, the value story, is usually the story where you as a leader talk about what matters most to you. What are your values? What are things that you value? Now, this story will help you connect with your team, because as your team understands more about your values, why things are important to you, they'll also be able to see that certain things that are important to you are also important to them. And we as human beings, when we talk with someone, when we meet somebody, we are looking for these common threads between our values. Because if I understand that you think that certain value is important and it's also important to me, now we have something in common. So ask yourself, why do you have certain values? Why do you value respect? Why do you value hard work? Or why do you value responsibility? And what you will find is that there's always a story behind it. We aren't just born with values. These are certain beliefs that are ingrained in us, usually through experiences, through teachings from our parents, but mainly through life-changing experiences that end up making these values become extremely important to us. One of the big mistakes that I've seen in organizations is when we talk about values, and especially if you as a leader are talking about your values, it's not enough just to say what the value is. It's not enough just to say, to me, hard work is important, or to me, excellence is important. Because those are just words, and words by themselves don't have much power. What makes words powerful and what actually gives words value are the stories that are behind these words. So I would challenge you to ask yourself that. First, what are the 3 to 5 most important values that I have as a leader? What things are very important to me and that I want my team to know? And it's important for your team to know that those things are values to you. And second, once you've identified them, ask yourself, what story is behind it? Why is this value, whatever it may be, why is it important to me? And with those questions, you'll start digging up some of these value stories that are extremely important to create connection and relatability with your team. Now, the second type of story that I see that all great leaders usually have is what I call the valiant story. And the valiant story is actually all about showing your team what you can do as a leader. This is the story where you talk about the things that you've accomplished, the things that you've achieved, but not in the typical way. And let me rephrase, let me repeat this actually, not in the typical way, because usually when we want to talk about our success and we want to talk about the things that we've accomplished, we tend to just, for example, say, this is, I've studied here and I've accomplished this and these are the responsibilities I've had and we've had great success. When I talk about sharing stories about your success, what you have to remember is that behind every success that you've accomplished in your life, there's probably been hard work. There's probably been sacrifice, persistence, even failure associated with it. And those moments, we'll call them of vulnerability, is what actually gives you more credibility. So if we as a leader just get up and we want to highlight our success because we think that that's what will help us be more credible, we can't just talk about all our victories. We also have to talk about the things that we've struggled with and all the things that we've had to persist in order to accomplish those victories. Those are moments of vulnerability, but remember that vulnerability creates credibility. That's why I call this the valiant story. Because anytime you have to face challenge to accomplish something great, anytime you have to work hard, sacrifice in order to achieve success, you're valiant. Valiant is not about easy. Valiant is about the struggle. Valiant is about all the things that you have to go through in order to become successful. The interesting thing about the valiant story, which I know you have as a leader, is that it creates trust and it generates more credibility for you as a leader. So these first 2 types of stories, what they will help you is to be much more connected and much more credible as a person, as an individual to your team. And I need you to understand this principle. I need you to understand an important psychological principle, especially when you're communicating. Your people and your audience, they first want to connect with the messenger. They first want to connect with the person who's communicating. By telling stories about your values, by talking about your success, but through the valiant story format, your audience, your team, your organization will connect with you as a messenger. And when people connect with you as a messenger, now it's much more probable and likely that they'll want to connect with your message. I'm going to repeat this because this is an important principle, and it's a powerful psychological and communicational principle. Your audience, when I say audience, that may be your team, that may be your client, that may be your customer, that may be your organization, your market. Your audience first wants to connect with the messenger so they can then connect with the message. So the third type of story is all about the message. The third type of story that I've seen great leaders tell is what I call the vision story. The vision story. And this story is all about communicating the vision. The vision is that picture of the future, of the tomorrow. Actually, one of the quotes that I really, really loved reading about vision, and it's a book by John Maxwell, who's one of the leading authorities in leadership in the world. He says, a vision is a picture of tomorrow that motivates us today. A vision is a picture of tomorrow that motivates us today. Which means that a vision is much more than a statement. This is one thing that we constantly see in organizations, and you've probably seen it as well being in an organization, is that you'll come up with the vision that you'll create at some offsite, and then you'll just come back and just write it out and put it on the wall. And you expect everyone to be moved by that, to be motivated by that. But a vision, a true vision, is a story. Is a story of a future that could be. A vision is a story that helps inspire movement and motivation in your team today. So when we think about great leaders and communicators and vision, we think about, for example, Martin Luther King Jr. and his vision, his dream, and how when he communicated that vision, that dream, he was very vivid in describing what he dreamed of. I have a dream. I have a dream. And he was able to communicate it in such a convincing manner, such a convincing fashion that people grasped and turned that into their own dream. I think of John F. Kennedy in the 60s and how he wanted to help put a man on the moon. And one of his speeches that he gave, where he was talking to college students actually, he talked about that vision of putting a man on the moon by the end of that century. And he was saying, we will use materials and we will use things that we don't even know of yet. And he even described the size of the spaceship. And he described the vision of what it would be like to be the first to walk on the moon. That is a vision of tomorrow that motivates us today. And that type of story, the vision story, is actually one of the most important stories that every leader needs to tell. The purpose of why I've talked about these two stories previous, the value and the valiant, is because, again, if we focus on this important communication and psychological principle of people want to connect with the messenger before the message, that means you have to be able to have instances to communicate these value stories, these valiant stories. So then when you communicate your vision, which is your message, people will be much more willing to follow it. And this is what I want to invite you to do. This is what I want to invite you to do. As a leader, I want to help you to find these 3 stories. Okay, these 3 stories are crucial for your success as a leader, for your influence as a leader. So first, again, think about your values and what stories can help explain where these values come from, where they originate. They always have an origin. Second, think about your valiant moments that have helped you become successful. What stories can you share about your success, but that also helps people connect with how hard and how difficult and even the sacrifices that you've had to make in order to accomplish that? That is valiant. And finally, think about the vision, your vision. And what stories do you have to communicate that picture of the future in a way that motivates us today? Look for these stories because it's the first step. Finding these stories is the first step to becoming a great and powerful and influential leader. Now, if you as a leader or your company need help in becoming this powerful, persuasive, influential communicator and leader, just go visit my website. It's www.cesarcastro.com. And you can learn all the different ways where I can help you and help you like I've helped hundreds of other leaders and organizations to become these powerful and influential communicators. Because out of all the skills that you can develop as a leader, out of all the skills, communicating, being able to speak in public and being able to tell stories is by far the most important skill you can develop. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Strategic Storytelling Podcast. Remember, if you still haven't subscribed, wherever you listen to it, go subscribe, go follow the podcast so you can be notified when our new episodes come out. And most importantly, continue to learn. I want you to continue to listen to the episodes so you can continue to learn how to communicate like a pro by leveraging the power of stories. Take care. Bye-bye.